Hello, welcome to the Flake Homestead. My name is Abby and today I am going to be doing a lot of cooking in my kitchen. I have a big meal prepping day. A couple different things that I'm doing. My friend just had twin baby girls and so I'm going to be bringing her a meal as well as some snacks and treats, things like that. So I will show you kind of my postpartum care package that I'm taking to her. And then I'm also going to be prepping some stuff for myself because I'm a busy mom of two, as well as some other foods for my family. So without further ado, I'm just gonna kind of take you along for the ride and show you what a day in my kitchen looks like. Okay, I am starting off the video by making some chicken that I had thawed in my fridge overnight. I'm just patting it dry and then putting it on a baking sheet. This is the absolute easiest way that I have found to cook chicken. It's very hands-off. You just throw it on a pan, and I used a little bit of olive oil on both sides, as well as some cracked salt and pepper. And then I flipped it over and I did the same thing on the other side before just putting it into an oven. Did I already say garlic powder? I also had garlic powder. And then I just put it into the oven at 350 degrees for about 35 to 45 minutes. Usually mine's around like the 40-minute mark, but sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. If you have one of those thermometers, you're going to want to check the internal temperature, make sure it gets to 165. So I put that in my oven while I got started on some other things. I just got this hutch recently and I love that I'm able to display all of my dishes in there and it's still very functional. We don't have a super big house, so it gives me so much more storage space. I'm making a big batch of oatmeal for my kids to enjoy. They love oatmeal in the morning, and this just takes one extra step off of my plate by making a big batch and freezing it in individual portions. But before I started, I realized that I didn't have any more oats in my container that I keep in my pantry. So I went into my food storage and I dumped some more into my jar. I get my grains in bulk from Azure Standard. I love them. They're organic and they're a great price. So I'm just adding 4 cups of oats into that pot, and then I am doing about 6 cups of water / milk. I only had like a cup and a half of milk left in my carton, so I just did the rest water, and I am just gonna let that simmer for a little bit until it starts to thicken, and then I just add water as needed. I threw in a little bit of cinnamon. I don't really have measurements for this. I just eyeball it, as well as a little bit of my homemade vanilla extract. Stir it up, and then I just put the lid on to let it simmer for a couple minutes while I was doing other things. Once I added my vanilla into my oatmeal, I realized that we were low on the vanilla that I also keep in my pantry, but I have another bottle that was brewing in my food storage. So I just did it right inside of the vodka bottle. If you don't know, you can make vanilla extract with just alcohol, vanilla beans, and a little bit of thyme. So I added that vodka vanilla mixture that had a really strong vanilla scent at this point, and I added that into my jar that I keep in my pantry, and then filled a little bit of leftover vodka that I had into the empty vanilla bean bottle. I hope that makes sense. I need to get another batch going soon, so I'll have to share a more in-depth video on that. I went back to the oatmeal and I added some raw organic honey. This is local honey. It's the orange blossom honey, so it's really light and sweet and so delicious. We are obsessed, and what a game changer organic local honey is for your health. If you are buying honey in the bare bottle that you just get at the normal store, I really would recommend trying some local honey wherever you're from. I found some bananas in my freezer. I usually buy a big batch of bananas and then I'll just freeze them when they go brown. So I'm just dicing them up a little bit, really just cutting them into slices. And then I'm going to add them into the oatmeal to kind of thaw as well as almost mush up. And that's also going to sweeten our oatmeal. I try to use as little sugar as possible. I prefer natural sugars. So while yes, I use cane sugar, it's organic cane sugar, you'll see it in this video, I try to limit it as much as I can, especially during breakfast, because I feel like blood sugar will just spike in the morning if you just have a bunch of sugar. So next, I'm just adding a little bit of peanut butter to add some calories, because if you know, you know. If you have toddlers, sometimes it's just hard to get them to eat. So if it's something they love and I can boost those calories, that's great. The chicken was done at this point, and it was beautiful. So I'm just setting that aside to let it cool while I work on making some little protein oat bites. I took about 2.5-3 scoops of oats and I just put them into a bowl. If you don't like big chunks of oats like this, you can always blend it and make an oat flour. If you did not know, that's literally what oat flour is. You just blend up some oats until it's a powder. And then I'm adding about a cup and a half of peanut butter. I use the natural peanut butter. I get it at Costco and I actually really enjoy it. It's just peanuts and salt. So you have to mix it a little bit because it's a little bit runnier than other peanut butter would be. And then I'm adding about a half cup of honey as well as some ground flax seeds. I'm giving that a good mix and it's going to start to look a little bit dry. I added a little bit of vanilla and then I am adding in my protein powder. I use the Just Ingredients protein powder and it is by far my favorite when it comes to ingredients, quality of ingredients, flavor. I think it's delicious. As you can see, I have an entire bucket dedicated to it in my pantry. I do have a discount code that's just Abbie Flake that you can use if you're wanting to shop their products. But once I got that in there, I mixed it up. Now I'm just eyeballing all of these ingredients. So I added a little bit more maple syrup just to get it a little bit more of a wet consistency because it was a little bit too dry for me. Then I added some dark chocolate chips. Measure that with your heart, but you can also add nuts. You can add any other mix-ins that you would like. And then I'm just rolling them out onto a cookie sheet. You can use one of those cookie scoops if you want, but I tend to just use my hands and I'm not a big fan of measuring anything. So when I'm using my hands, like some balls are going to be a little bit bigger than others, but it's not a big deal, really. They're all going to be delicious and it's going to be totally okay. Next, I just threw some unsweetened coconut flakes into a bowl, and then I'm just rolling those balls into those coconut flakes. And that just gives it a little bit of extra texture, and I love coconut. I add it wherever I can. And the mom that I'm giving these to, these will just give her a little bit of energy whenever she just needs a quick pick-me-up but doesn't quite have time for a full meal. Taking care of twins, I'm sure, is a very big feat. So these are delicious. I'm saving some for us and then some will go to her. And that's that. Next, I pulled my Instant Pot out because I am going to be making some Instant Pot mac and cheese. This is one of my kids' favorites and it is a staple here. So I make a big batch and then I freeze it into individual cups so that I can reheat it as needed for my kids for lunches or quick dinners if I am gone and my husband's with the kids. And I know exactly what's in it. It's not like a craft box mac and cheese. So I just take some noodles and I put them into the Instant Pot and then I cover them with water. And then I take a few tablespoons of butter and just put them over the top. And then I also forgot to mention, I added some vegetable bouillon in there just to give it a little bit more flavor. I'm going to put my lid on, make sure it's on sealing, and then I'm going to pressure cook that for 4 minutes. While that's going, my oatmeal has since cooled, so I am putting the oatmeal into my muffin tins. These are like the oversized, really large muffin tins. I get them on Amazon. I love that they're silicone. They make an amazing option for being able to just freeze something in it and then pop it right out afterward. So I actually use these a lot when I'm meal prepping things like this in individual serving sizes. So I put all the oatmeal into each little cup, and then I had some leftover strawberries and blueberries, and so I just topped the little oatmeal cups with those. And then when I'm gonna reheat them, I will just throw them right into a pot on low and let them kind of thaw that way. I can even thaw them in the fridge overnight and then do that, or you could just pop them right into the microwave. It's totally up to you how you would like to reheat them, but these are so nice to have on busy mornings with my kids, or when I just don't feel like getting a bunch of dishes dirty in the morning. My chicken has cooled all the way, so I am cubing it because this is going to be going into the chicken alfredo that I'm making for dinner. I'm making some for my friend who just had her babies, and then there will be enough left over for us to have some for dinner. So I'm just cubing that chicken and then setting it aside to use for later. The mac and cheese was done. Now, honestly, I let this go a little bit longer than I should have, so the noodles overcooked just a touch, but I put it on saute, and then I'm adding some sharp raw cheddar cheese. We also get our cheddar from Azure Standard, and we love it. It is so delicious. I love that it's raw, so you have all of those nutrients. But I'm going to add some cheese as well as a little bit of milk, and then on that saute mode, I'm just going to stir it up to combine it all and make sure everything gets melted and incorporated. I'm adding a little bit of garlic powder as well as some smoked paprika. This is my favorite in mac and cheese. I don't know why, but it makes it taste so delicious. I'm adding a little bit of salt and pepper as well and giving it one more mix, and then I will let that cool while I move on to my next project. I realized I'm going to need this muffin tin that was already in the freezer, and I had frozen some things in, so I'm transferring everything into a container to go back into the freezer. So this is just, we had leftovers from a Mexican night, so I've got some rice, I have some homemade refried beans, and some homemade fajita veggies, and so all of those are just going to go into this container and back into the freezer. I also had some Mexican quinoa that I had made, so I just put a piece of wax paper and then added that in there too. I love using these type of storage containers for my freezer, and then I just took these little stickers and I just wrote Mexican food because that's essentially everything that's in there, and then I kind of just gave a brief description. It was in there. I put one on top and then on the side so that I can easily see what it is. Once that muffin tin was free, I was able to then put the mac and cheese in there. So I just scooped it into the individual compartments. And then this muffin tin obviously did not have enough room, so I just put it all onto a cookie sheet, and then I put on these silicone muffin liners that I have, and I just scooped them into those. That's also a really great option that's affordable if you want something like this to freeze things in individual portions. Once that was all done, those were put into my freezer to solidify before I'll put them into a container like before. At this point, my kitchen was a disaster. So this is I'd already cleaned quite a bit, and I had already done the dishes, but my dishes were piling high. So I did the dishes, and then I'm just wiping my counter before continuing, because if my kitchen gets too messy, then I'm just an overwhelmed mess. I have some all-purpose cleaner concentrate that I use. I just poured about a third of my container and then filled the rest with water. I have my all-purpose cleaner ready to go. So I give that a little bit of a shake, and then it is ready to spray my counters. I go through this stuff like crazy. It works so well, and I can make an entire big batch for pennies on the dollar. It costs me almost nothing. I just use a wet rag and I spray my counters, and then I give it all a really good wipe before getting ready to continue to make some more food. One of the first things that I always tell people when they ask where they should start with homesteading is switching out their cleaners to non-toxic cleaners that you make yourself. It is so affordable to do and so simple to do, and they're products that you're already using and probably already have in your house, and it'll save you so much money. So if I could recommend one thing, it would be giving homemade cleaners a try. Next up, this is one of my most requested recipes. I've shared it before, but I'm sharing it again today, and it is my bread recipe. I'm making a loaf of sandwich bread as well as some rolls because my friend requested rolls, but I'm starting with 2 cups of warm water, borderline hot water, and then 2 tablespoons of active dry yeast. And then I'm going to put in 2 eggs. Now this is a double batch, so if you wanted to just make 1 loaf of bread or 1 dozen rolls, you would just cut this recipe in half. And I am going to add a couple tablespoons of olive oil. I am using 4. You could also use butter. Just make sure it's melted. Then I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt as well as 1/2 cup of sugar or honey. I'm just using sugar today, and I honestly just grab a fistful of it and eyeball it. I've made this so many times, I don't really measure, but I'm just going to get that on a low speed to kind of incorporate it a little bit, and then I'm going to start adding my flour. You're going to need a total of like 6.5 cups, but I also just kind of eyeball this at this point. You just want it to knead for a couple minutes and have it not be super sticky to the touch. This one was a little bit stickier, but I just kneaded it on the counter for a minute, which you will see. And that just made it easier to get it to the point where it wasn't super sticky. I love making homemade bread. It really was intimidating for me at first, but once you get the hang of it, it is so simple to do, and it kind of just flows into your routine so easily. And I obviously think the health benefits are amazing, and I really think that it's just a game changer to make your own bread. Now, as you can see, I'm kneading the dough, and you don't need a stand mixer to make this bread, or any bread for that matter. You really just need your hands, a little bit of flour, and a countertop, and you can make any bread that you would like. So that's kind of how I knead the bread, and then I'm just spraying down my bowl, the same bowl that I mixed it in, spraying the top of the dough, and then I will cover it with a wet dish towel. I'm going to set it aside for about an hour so it can double in size. This dough rises pretty quickly. And while that is rising, I am going to start on an egg bake that I'm making for myself. I am a vegetarian, and so I try to get as much protein as I can in my diet. So I love eggs. I use them often. I had a little bit of extra egg whites as well, so I threw that in. But I'm using 12 eggs and probably about a cup of egg whites. Now, this is my favorite hack. I stick my spinach right into the freezer, and then when it is ready to be put into a recipe, you can just crumble it up right with your hands, and you don't need to chop anything. I like my spinach very finely chopped, but I don't want to have to do the fine chopping. I'm just throwing in whatever vegetables I have. So I had some stems of green onion. I love onion, especially in my eggs. So I'm throwing those in, as well as a red bell pepper. The beauty of this type of bake is you can really add whatever you want. Zucchini, mushrooms, whatever you have on hand, you can toss into this recipe and it will be delicious. You can add any sort of meat. You can add potatoes to it. The options are really endless, and it just makes a delicious, easy, healthy breakfast that's higher in protein, because I have a hard time sometimes getting a good nutritious breakfast in with 2 kids running around. So anyway, bell peppers going in, and then I'm just giving it a little bit of a mix to combine it and see how much else I need. I'm adding some salt and some pepper, of course. I'm also going to throw in some garlic powder at the end. And then now this is the secret ingredient. It's not really a secret, but it's a whole container of cottage cheese. I use low-fat cottage cheese, and this will boost that protein, and it's delicious. It will make it creamy. You could blend the cottage cheese to make it more like a ricotta yogurt type texture, which works great. I use blended cottage cheese for a lot of different things. I'm spraying my cookie sheet, and then I'm just pouring those eggs directly onto the cookie sheet with no parchment paper. This is a stainless steel cookie sheet, so it works great. And then I just have more of that sharp raw cheddar cheese that we get from Azure Standard, and I'm topping the whole egg bake with that. Once that's ready to go into the oven, very carefully transfer it to the oven. It's a little sloshy because it's raw egg, but I got that into a 350-degree oven, and it baked for about 30 minutes. But you just want to make it so it's not jiggly in the middle. Then my dough was ready. Like I said, it rises quite quickly, and I'm splitting it into 2 because, like I said, I'm making some rolls as well as a loaf of bread. Now this half I'm setting aside to be the loaf of bread, and I don't do anything in particular to shape it. I kind of just roll it into itself like that, and then I'm just gonna slice it into pieces. So I do 4 pieces, and then I cut those 4 pieces in half, and then I cut them in half again. So it will make 16 rolls normally, but I didn't cut them perfectly evenly, so I think I ended up making like 14, which is fine. Works great. I don't measure or weigh my rolls. I know a lot of people will, so that they have a really uniform size, but I am just, it's not that serious, and they all turn out great every time. So one might be a little bit bigger than the other, but that's okay. I've got a baby on my hip at this point. I'm putting that dish towel back onto the rolls to do a second rise just for a little bit while the oven is preheating. And then I need to tell you about this bread pan. It is new. I just got it. It has a lid, and it is the most incredible thing that I have ever used. It works so well. It makes the perfect sandwich bread. I will have it linked down below. My egg bake was done, so I pulled that out. I'm going to let it cool, set it aside. And now I'm going to start on my chicken alfredo. Now this is the dinner that I'm bringing my friend tonight. And I'm making enough for our family as well. So I'm just getting the noodles on, adding a little bit of salt to the water. And while the noodles are boiling, I am prepping my garlic to smash into my sauce. The bread was risen a little bit, so it's ready to go into the oven, and it's going to be 350 degrees, the rolls for about 15 minutes, and then the bread for about 25. I'm getting started on my sauce, so I used 2 sticks of butter and then 1 cup of flour, and then I am adding some smashed garlic into the pan to saute with it for a minute, and then I am adding some milk. I don't really measure any of this. I just kind of eyeball it until I get the thickness that I want in my sauce. I like a thinner sauce, So I'm just adding a couple cups of milk, and then I'm kind of stirring in all of those roux chunks. Now I'm also adding a block of cream cheese. I know a lot of people say, like, why do white people add a full block of cream cheese to everything? But this is actually how I was taught to make it. I know it's not authentic Alfredo sauce, because Alfredo sauce is really just butter and cheese. So it's not authentic, but it is delicious. I'm adding some salt and pepper, and then I'm grating some Parmesan cheese. I just get this big old block from Costco. It lasts us a really long time, and it works well. I do not buy the pre-shredded Parmesan cheese because it has sawdust in it, which is a little bit crazy. So I shred my own, and that works really well for us. I'm adding some more milk because it's still pretty thick and I'm making a mess at the same time. But I am going to just kind of keep an eye on it. I added my cheese and it was thick and beautiful at that point. I also added some leftover pasta water. I wish I would have reserved a little bit more because it definitely could have been a thinner sauce. But this is just what worked. So then I poured it into my pasta pot, and I am going to get it all mixed up and incorporated. This is obviously a very big batch of chicken alfredo. You can always just make a single serving of this. You do not have to have a whole pot. But I will say, it freezes beautifully if you want to make it into a freezer meal. Then I added that chopped chicken that we made earlier this morning, giving that one last stir before transferring it to the baking dish. Because I'm going to be gifting this main casserole, I'm just using a disposable dish because I don't want my friend to have to worry about cleaning and returning any of my dishes. I'm topping it with some mozzarella cheese and some Parmesan cheese so that I can bake it and give it a little bit of a crusty top with that melty cheese. Delicious. So I'm just putting that in the oven on broil for a few minutes to get that going. My sandwich bread had since come out. Look how perfect and beautiful that is. I can leave the whole recipe down in the description box below so you can make your own, as well as the link for the pan. But I'm gonna set that aside to cool completely before cutting it. That is the key. You wanna make sure it's completely cool. Then I'm just making the rest of that chicken alfredo is going into a smaller dish for my family, because what's all this work without us having any dinner at the end of it? So I threw that in a pan. I'm doing the same thing with the mozzarella and Parmesan, and then that's gonna go in the oven right next to the other dish, and they're both gonna broil, just get a little bit crispy, and they will be delicious. Now this mozzarella we buy in bulk from Azure Standard and shred it and then freeze it. So if I don't let it set out and thaw for a while before, sometimes I have to break it up like this, and it works. It works totally fine. So don't be afraid to freeze your cheese if you need to. Even those big chunks, they cook down and they melt and they're beautiful. So I just added it. Anyway, that's going into the oven. This is how the first casserole looks. I'm gonna let it cool just a little bit so that I can cover it and prep it to take over to my friend's house. The last thing I'm making is just a little snack for her. I'm using some of my home canned beans. I have pinto beans and black beans. These are probably the absolute easiest thing you could possibly can. And then I'm adding the other half of that red bell pepper that I used in my egg bake, as well as some tomato. It's still tomato season here, so we have been loving that, but my garden is kind of on its last leg with this heat in Arizona. It is struggling, so I'm probably going to pull out my tomato plants and start new plants in August, which will be great. And then I'm adding those beans in, and I'm adding just some frozen corn. I like the white kernel corn for this because I feel like it just has that extra sweetness that's really good in this. Then I'm adding a green bell pepper.
I know some people don't love raw bell pepper, so when I do know people that don't do that, I just chop it really small because it kind of disperses that taste and you don't just get a big old bite of bell pepper. I did some cilantro and some red onion. I ended up actually using almost the entire red onion rather than just half. But this is also something that you can just eyeball and do whatever you want with. You could add jalapeno, you could add green chilies, whatever. I will say my camera died at this point, but I added salt and pepper and I added a little bit of honey and then the juice of 2 limes. And I mixed all of that up and kind of let it marry with the flavors and seasonings, and then I will package that up with some chips, and it's just a quick dip to enjoy late at night while she's up with the babies and hungry, or just over tacos or a side with any meal. So anyway, this is the entirety of everything that I made today. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll subscribe. I'm excited to bring you lots more content like this. This is all the food that I packed up for my friend. I'm gonna head over to her house and bring her her meal so that she can eat dinner and enjoy her snacks. Anyway, I will catch you in the next video. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you soon.